It's Erin Anderson with the Erin Anderson Betrayal Trauma Coaching. I am super excited that you have tuned in today. Let's get talking about how to heal from betrayal trauma. Welcome back to another episode of The Other Side of the Struggle. We have back with us the fabulous Trevor Henniger. Did I say that right this time, Trevor?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
yay.
All
I'm
good.
so glad. I know last time I kept slaughtering that, and I'm like, oh man. Anyway, but we have back with us Trevor Henniger, and he is one of the leaders in the Rise Undaunted program for men. And he's been on this program before. He's talked about the nice guy syndrome. And so we'll definitely be talking a little bit about that again today. But, when Trevor and I met just a minute ago and just kind of started chatting, like one of the topics that really came to the surface for us was this idea of the scarcity mindset and how we see this playing out in some of our clients, how we are seeing this playing out in marriages, and how this also passes on to communication issues in our marriages and in our relationships. And so we definitely felt like that was a good piece to discuss today. So without further ado, welcome Trevor.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here again, Erin. I love your podcast. It's great to have someone who's right in line with what I do with men, and you're focusing more on women, and it's great for sure.
It is. It really is because even though I do coach some men, right? There's nothing like having a man coach a man because like men can kind of understand the men mindset, right? And women can kind of understand the women mindset, right? And
yeah,
even though like there's a lot of crossovers and similarities and stuff like that, like I do love that there's a place that I can send men to and be like, hey, this is if you guys are looking for help, like these are the guys to go hang out with and chat with,
right.
right?
Yep,
So
totally.
one of the things like we were talking about, my followers and my audience, was like, what does the scarcity mindset look like? And this is something that I have talked about previously on this podcast, right? I've been doing this podcast now for 2 years, a little over 2 years, right?
Okay.
And so, lots of different topics discussed here, but the scarcity mindset has been talked about before. But I feel like it definitely needs to be expanded on and discussed in more detail because this is something that I think a lot of people don't realize is causing a lot of problems in their life.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And it can be scarcity in anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
We tend to think about money when we think of scarcity mindset. It could be
Mm-hmm.
scarcity about money. It could be scarcity about love. It could be scarcity about sex. It could be scarcity about, I mean, there's any number of things that we could have that scarcity mindset about. And it's really interesting is I love this analogy of if someone stuck a plastic bag over your head and you couldn't breathe, air would become very scarce, right? And what would happen is all we would be able to think about is air. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I need air.
Right.
Give me air immediately. Yet right now, I'm not thinking about air. Like I never really think about air because it's just always
Right.
there. It's in abundance,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um,
Yeah,
so it's something I don't think about.
you're
Um,
right.
but if I'm running out of money, boy, I start thinking about money all of the time because every single thing pretty much in our world costs money, right?
Yeah, it's
So
connecting.
you start getting scarce on money, and it's like, ah,
What do I do? Yeah, no,
yeah,
I totally get it. I totally get it. And and I'm not saying that I'm perfect with this either. I think that there's still things that I need to work on as well, right? With my own
sure,
scarcity and my own money story. But the thing is what people don't realize, I think, is how that scarcity mindset, especially around like money, is also there's also something scarce in their mindset about their relationships,
Hmm.
scarce in their relationship with themselves, and somehow it turns into a trust issue with God, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying like there's not going to be times of trial and times where things are going to be tight and you're going to be like, "Ooh, boy, how am I going to do this?" But when you're sitting there saying to yourself like and giving yourself all these excuses, right? I mean, you and I were both talking about like some of the excuses we've heard from our clients, like, well, I'm disabled, I rely on the government, and I can't make th this kind of money otherwise, like the government will stop supporting me. And it's like, good,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Right. Yeah, we talk. It's easy to. It's definitely. I had a client who. For the first year I did Rise Undaunted, it was all free, and I thought for sure, I'm like, this is the way to go because there's so many people who just don't have a ton of money. They need some help, and I'm going to be there to help them, right?
Hmm.
And sure, there was some guys that got some help, right? But then as time went on, I realized there was also men who weren't willing to take ownership of their life, and they just wanted to show up, and it was like a social club to them. Like it's just a place where I can talk, but also I can just, whine and complain about my situation or complain about my circumstances, and not actually do anything about it. But as soon as I started charging money, like I started at $12 a month. That was when I started at. Like you can't really get much cheaper than that, right? But it was
No.
amazing how those guys disappeared like instantly. Those guys that weren't willing to take ownership, they completely disappeared out of the group when I started
Interesting.
charging $12. And I
Well,
was like, this is crazy. Like it's actually I was like, it's a miracle because Rise Undaunted is a rising tide. We are
hmm
all the men in Rise Undaunted, we all want to become better versions of ourselves.
hmm
And if we're listening to guys just whine and complain about their situation or their circumstances and not actually take ownership for it, that doesn't help anyone. That just makes the tide go down. It stops rising and it starts dropping, right?
hmm
Uh, and so we do a lot of group stuff, group coaching, group conversations, stuff like that. And so we want, it's not that we don't come to the group saying, well, my life is so wonderful, because that's not at all what it is. Like it is a safe space for men to be able to share when they're struggling with something. But the difference is they actually know what they can do to work on that, right? And they're
hmm
actually taking action to constantly work on whatever it is, and not
right,
just complaining about the same thing every single week, right?
right,
Yeah.
right. Well, and that's the whole point. Like, we want to shift. We're here to grow. We're here to do
Right.
something different. And, same thing with me. Like, I've been coaching for 10 years. And so, I've had to work through a lot of my own scarcity mindset kind of stuff,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And my scarcity mindset also transmuted over into similar things, like with clients, like, oh, you can't pay for it. That's okay. You know, blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah, blah, blah. Um, but these same thing, like these were women that were still stuck and having the same problems over and over and over and over and over and over again, and they
Yeah.
weren't making progress,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Um, I'll tell you another really fascinating story too. I also had another client who I had actually worked with for a couple of years, and she still owed me, a couple $1,000s by the end of the coaching, right?
Hmm.
And she totally stiffed me,
Wow.
right? And it is what it is. Not saying anything against her, but and I totally forgave her, whatever, and moved past that.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting to see that once she was not willing to do more action, and it took a lot of time for me to get her to take some action in her life, right? And
Hmm.
once she got to that point where she was like, nope, I'm not doing this anymore, I really want everything to be on my husband now. She stopped paying me. She refused to
Right.
pay me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I learned at that point, to get really good contracts in place, right?
Yeah.
Because
Right.
we want, and it's not about like you and I charge money not because of the money. It's because we're attracting a certain type of person into our businesses to move forward.
Right.
People, like, there's a very few people that will actually get in and do the work that
Right.
actually don't have some type of skin in the game,
Totally. Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's interesting because I did a Google search the other day. I was like trying to find something about sacrifice,
Mm-hmm.
because uh because I've always understood that when you sacrifice something, it makes it holy. Like, and so I did this quick search, and the answer, I'm not saying that Google knows everything by any means, but it was really kind of fascinating because I was like, that's a really good answer. It said the term sacrifice derives from the Latin sacre, meaning sacred, and fakir, meaning to make or to do. Sacrifice means to make sacred.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, I was like, that's so true. Like, it's
Yeah,
part
you're
of the
you're right.
word, sacrifice. And so by making that sacrifice, and so for some people, $2,000 isn't going to be a sacrifice. And
Mm-hmm.
so it isn't going to be very sacred, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they may not put much ownership or much effort into making that change because $2,000 isn't a sacrifice. Maybe for them it has to be $20,000 for that sacrifice to help, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, but for some people, $25 is a sacrifice, right?
Yeah. Well, totally. I've actually talked to people in like South Africa, right? Where they're making like $80 a month, right? And living off of $80 a month. Now, granted, prices over in the African continent are a
Yeah, right,
lot
right.
lower than what they are here, but at the same
Yeah.
time, to them, like $25 is a giant sacrifice,
Oh,
right?
sure. Yeah.
Right? And you think about like $15,000, like there's just like that to me and you would be maybe like a million, you know?
Right.
That's a little bit hard for them to fathom.
Mm.
But, you know, and it's like I've said so many times, in this day and age with modern technology, like you literally can make thousands of dollars from your own home,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Airbnb and all kinds of other things you can do.
right?
I-
There's Airbnb. There's like we were talking earlier about like, hey, like look at publishing audiobooks.
Right.
Get good
Oh,
at
yeah.
that. That's a giant market right now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like go
Or
learn
Kindle books.
something. Kindle
Yeah.
books, right?
Right.
Something. Go learn something and put together some sort of a book on it and put it out there to the public. Lots of
Right.
people are making thousands of dollars doing that. People are making thousands of dollars writing greeting cards,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And selling those greeting cards or Etsy or online teaching, like,
Yeah.
you don't have to be a coach to make thousands of dollars.
Right. Well, it's interesting because a lot of people they get caught into this whole thing like I can go on social media and I can become an influencer. I just need to post way more every single day, and I need to get all these people watching me, and that way I can make free money just by posting. And it's like stop
It
trying to
doesn't.
win the lottery. It doesn't
Yeah,
work,
it
right?
doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
It
it's like
doesn't.
go like it's really not that difficult to make money. You find a need and you fill the need, right?
Yeah.
Provide some value to the marketplace. Stop trying to influence people and just provide value to the marketplace. When I was a newlywed, I got the public library in town was offering they decided to offer a thing where I was going to be they hired me to be a tutor because I lived in a really small town retirement community, lots of elderly folks. This was 20 some years ago. They didn't know how to use their computers,
Mhm.
and so I would literally, they could come to the library or I could go to their home and I could literally teach them how to use their computers. And they
Mhm.
would charge, like the library would charge, what I don't remember what it was, probably $10 an hour, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would make, I would make the wage working for the library, and they would pay, and it would help trying to help the community, right? That was the public library was trying to do. And I'm like, now, I bet you anyone, like everybody basically knows how to use a smartphone, right? Everybody has a smartphone. They've had one for years. They know how to use it. But think about that 70-year-old grandmother or grandfather who doesn't know how to use that smartphone.
Yeah.
Do you do you know how much, like some of them, sure, some of them may not want to pay any money or may not have money to pay to help them, but I bet you money there's a ton of those people who would love to have someone come over to their home and show them how to use their phone.
Yeah,
And they'd
exactly.
probably be willing to pay $20 an hour because, like, how many hours would it really take? Come over to my
5 minutes,
house once a week. Yeah, come
right?
over to my house once a week and spend an hour with me. Show me how to do this. I don't know how to do text messaging. Okay, you click on this, and like it's not that hard for us, but the thing is, it's value to the
Mhm.
marketplace, and
Right?
you get paid for bringing value to the marketplace.
Right.
It's not that difficult to make money.
Well, and so the thing is, and this is why this is actually a really good intro into the next section here, and that is the reason why this happens is because relationships equal money. You are going to be paid from creating value with a relationship,
Right,
right? So, for example, I've got a 16-year-old son, right? And no, he's not making great money,
right,
but he's working down at the local diner flipping burgers,
yeah,
right? And he has a relationship with his boss who pays him for the value he creates,
right,
right?
totally,
My other teenage son, he's 14, right? He goes out and he herds sheep every single summer, comes home at the end of the summer with like 1,500 bucks, right?
right,
For a 14-year-old kid, that's great money,
yeah,
right?
right,
Simply because he goes out early every single morning in the summer and herds sheep with
nice,
with the sheep herder,
yeah,
right? And he's super consistent and all these things. And so he's learning these skills out in the workplace. Both of these boys are to earn some money for themselves. They're learning how to manage their money and all of these things because they have a relationship with the person that pays them,
right,
right? Same
yeah,
thing with you
totally,
and me.
yeah,
It's totally the same thing with you and me, right? We have to go out and get a relationship with our clients. We
mhm,
have to connect with them to help them understand that no, we're not going to go stiff them. We
right,
want to help them get a certain result, right? And
yeah,
if they really, really want that result, they're going to put some value on it.
hmm,
And when they
yeah,
put that value on it, all of a sudden now they're having a fantastic experience, right? And
mhm,
it's all through relationships. And,
yeah,
you know, a minute ago we talked about like, yeah, let's get you off of government assistance. There's no shame on being on
yeah,
government assistance. Like I don't want to like say that, you know, bad on you or anything like that. No, there's no shame on that. Just the thing is you want to consider that kind of relationship. Like you're getting paid from people you don't know and that don't really know you or your specific situation or what's actually happening. And is that something that you want to continue? And most of the time, people are going to say no, that they want to have some freedom. They want to feel like they can go out and buy the car that they need or pay for the education that they want. Or, I'm thinking about a specific client of mine who is, again, really disabled, uh, struggling in her marriage. Um, and feeling very judged and very abandoned by her community too because of everything that's happening. And she's also dependent upon the government. And one of the things that I've talked to her about just back and forth a little bit is it worth it? Is it worth it being dependent on the government,
right,
right? Is that maybe one step? And this is the only reason why I'm saying like good. If you're like I don't want that anymore. That's good.
right,
Because is it worth it being dependent on someone other than yourself? Because
Right. Right.
you can be in this day and age absolutely self-dependent, but that's going to take stopping the blame, stopping, the anger to some degree,
Right.
and saying, okay, what am I really seriously willing to change? What am I willing to do? What fears are, and that's what scarcity is, right? What fears are standing in my
Yeah.
way, stopping me from actually getting this thing that I want, getting the support I want, actually finding the relationships I want? What is it that's stopping me,
Yeah.
right? What is the
Right.
fear, right?
For sure.
And you know, it I've talked a couple of times about the trauma cycle on this podcast where, you get the trigger, which in this case is going to be money, right?
Hmm.
The re-traumatization. A lot of us, like, if you're feeling triggered by money, you're not alone. Okay, there's a lot of people out there, even coaches, right?
Yeah.
Trevor and I were just talking about like how we started off. Like, I charged $35 an hour for personal
Hmm.
coaching,
Right.
you know, when I
Yeah. I
first
did 50
started.
my first time. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it's like I don't do that anymore. And that person, love her with all my heart still to this day, but she made little tiny bits of progress.
Yeah.
Now, I charge like $1,000 for a 2-hour session,
Right.
right? And I have people that literally go from feeling pretty hopeless and not knowing what their next steps are to making massive shifts and massive
Hmm.
progress simply because they chose to value their result, value themselves, and stop the scarcity,
Right.
right? They chose the faith over the fear. But you're I'm just saying, like, there's no shame also from being stuck in the trauma cycle. There's no shame in feeling stuck by money, right? It's a societal problem. There's a
Well, yeah.
lot of people,
Yeah.
a lot of
We're
people out there
programmed.
that, yeah,
Yeah.
totally programmed, right?
For
And
sure.
so if that's your trigger, cool. No judgment. Yeah, that's going to re-traumatize you because you've learned that money doesn't show up for you, right?
Right.
That's what we've learned. And money is a type of relationship. And so if money doesn't show up for you, you're going to feel abandoned. We're getting into now that word with nice guy syndrome and stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody likes to be abandoned,
Right.
right? We get into reaction and blame. We get angry. We blame the government. We blame our spouses. We blame, maybe even blame ourselves, right? For how money hasn't shown up, or maybe how I failed, or how I've done nothing about this, or it's all my fault, or my husband keeps spending all of this money, right? Or, all these things.
Oh.
We get into that.
Yeah.
Then we get into coping and avoidance.
Hmm.
If money comes our way, we spend it as fast as we possibly can because it's a dangerous thing and we want to get it away from us as quickly as possible. And
Right.
we wonder why we don't have it, right?
Yeah.
It's your subconscious playing games on you.
Yeah.
But and then you cope by also spending money, right?
Yep.
And then when you realize you don't have it, you
Sure.
try to get into control by saying nobody can spend any money, right? Or
Right.
no, we can't go buy diapers. No, we can't go buy food. No, we can't go. We can't. And so we get into the scarcity mindset. That's where we get into the control. And when we get super ultra focused on the money and the lack of it, that's all we see, and we get re-triggered. And so the trauma cycle just continues to keep going. And that also transmutes into our relationships because, when I've talked about the relational tiers on this program before, and money is that bottom tier, right? The abundance tier.
Hmm.
But if you look back up the tiers, you've got the relationship with others, your relationship with yourself, and your relationship with God. And God has promised us, and honestly, love promises us. If you don't believe in God, what's your highest form of love, right?
Right.
Love in general promises us to care for us. That's what love does,
Yeah.
to actually provide for us. But we have to also be willing to trust ourselves to go out and create this income, to go
Yeah.
out and create what it is we need to create. And I think that's something that the adversary actually does, is teaches us to fear creation,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And we're creators, like we're children of God. God,
Yes,
that means, we are his offspring. We have so much potential to create. Yet what do we do when we're in the scarcity mindset? We don't. We're just afraid of everything. You know.
right?
I love one of the we have a Divine King manifesto, and it's got a list of 18 different manifestos on there that we work on these all the time in Rise Undaunted. And one of them is, I have the integrity to take responsibility for every aspect of my life and don't give my power to others by passing the blame. Because
I
once,
love that.
if we're willing to pass the blame, we're also passing the power to whoever we blamed. So as long
Yes,
as we're not taking ownership of our situation or our circumstances or whatever it is, then we can't change it because we
right.
now pass the power to someone else to change. So now they can change our life, but we can't.
Right. And you're so
Yeah,
true. You're talking about actually my fifth pillar right here, right? I talk about the adversaries versus the pillars, right?
yeah,
And ownership and blame are the fifth pillar and fifth adversary.
okay.
And you're totally right. The adversaries are going to tell you that you can't do anything about this. That's
Hmm.
how you know you're in those adversaries, right? Was when when
Right.
you're blaming, even blaming yourself, it's literally taking the power of the do away from you.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so what we have to do to cross over into the pillar, which is ownership, like you're outlining this beautifully. You really are,
Thanks.
right? The 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 bridge between the two is forgiveness and
Mm,
realizing that it's for the giving,
right.
right? If we're feeling scarce, if we're feeling that fear, if we're feeling stuck, this is for the giving,
Mm,
right? Giving it up to God, doing some journaling, working past this fear. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to immediately get past it tomorrow, because here's the deal. If you're in a fearful mindset, you're probably not going to make some great and wise decisions, okay?
right. Yeah, yeah.
Right? So, take some time to really understand this fear
Hmm.
and why it's present, what's showing up, right?
Right.
And some ideas on how to move past it and what you personally can take ownership for, start to shift, to grow, to change.
Hmm.
And then that's going to start putting you back in that position of power, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for
I
sure.
love that. I love that. So, how do we shift? How do we heal a scarcity mindset, Trevor?
Mm. That's a good question. Well, I'll tell you what's one of the things we can really do to change our scarcity mindset, because I want to go into the changing part first. Um, is it I heard the phrase years ago from one of my coaches: you don't get what you want, you don't get what you need, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you focus on.
Yes, I
And
love
so,
that.
yeah, so if you're focusing on the scarcity of money, what are you going to get? More
Scarce.
scarcity of money. If you're
Yes.
focusing on scarcity of love, if you're focusing on your spouse's addiction, what are you going to
Right?
get?
Right.
If you're focusing
Right.
on how terrible your spouse is, what are you going to get? More
Right.
of your terrible spouse. Like you're not
Yeah.
going to, it's really not that complicated. It's very basic. Like if we're focusing on how much debt we have, what are we going to get? More of debt.
It, if we're focusing on, the paper thin walls behind you in your office and your kids running past screaming, what are you going to get?
Right.
More kids screaming while you're on your podcast, right?
Right, exactly. So it's like, okay, so if we want to have different results, What do we have to do? Change our focus.
Yes.
Stop focusing on all our problems, because that just gives us more problems. I have a coach who's basically saying, we've all heard it before. Imagine the future. Imagine what you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we just hit the beginning of the year, right? We've got New Year's resolutions, we got goals, we got all these things that, the gym. This is the busiest time of the gym for the whole year is January, right? Everybody's going to the gym because they're all fired up and pumped up, or at least
I'm
they,
not.
yeah,
I'm not.
or
But
right, or at least they bought the membership, hoping that that's going to make them healthy.
I might have done that. Oh dear.
I think we've all done that before, right? But
Right.
here's the thing: if we are visualizing what we want, so we want a healthy relationship with our spouse, we want a healthy body, we want to have, more money, we want to have freedom, we want to have security. Like, these are the things that we need to focus on. We need to be visualizing these, meditating, visualizing our future. And it's interesting. What I've learned recently is anytime you set a goal, what happens if you set a goal? I'm going to lose 50 pounds, right? We set this goal this year, I'm going to lose 50 pounds. And then but what's the first thing we do? We think in our minds, we think, I've never done that before. That's not possible. Like,
Right.
because we
Yep.
we tend to look at our past. We say the past predicts the future, but that's not true. The past doesn't predict the future, but our mind thinks that it does, right? We've never done it
Mm-hmm.
before. Our subconscious mind. And so instead, what we need to do is visualize the future, focus on what it is that we want rather than focusing on what we don't want, and then look at all, like, really visualize it, like take in the emotions, take in the sounds, the smells, the tastes, the sights, all the things that come from that beautiful future that you want. It doesn't have to be 10 or 20 years in the future. It could just be next year. It could just be next month. Like, there's no time is only in our mortal minds. It can happen as fast as we allow it to happen, because the problem is our 6 inches between our ears. That's the problem. It's our brain that's the problem. It's not anything else. It's not our
Right.
situation. It's not our circumstances. So as long as
It's our thoughts. Yeah.
yeah, it's our thoughts. This is the part that's stopping us, not anything else. So
Mm-hmm.
by visualizing what we want in the future, and then feeling that, and really really like imagining it, like, we all have wonderful imaginations. Just think about how, take your favorite fruit and how juicy and sweet and delicious that is when you bite into it,
Now I
and
want a
and,
peach.
and yeah, right, and how, like, oh my gosh, I can taste it, right? You
Oh
can
yeah.
taste that peach or whatever it is that you're biting into, and you just like you're salivating. You're like, oh my gosh, why is that? Why are you salivating? You didn't actually bite a peach. It's because your imagination is so good at visualizing something. So if you visualize yourself as that ideal weight or health, if you
Mm-hmm.
visualize your marriage as that ideal marriage, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what you focus on, and then imagine what that's going to feel like when you get it, and then here's the real powerful part: you move it to the past. So you take that visualization and you move it as if it had already happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever. You visualize it happening in the past and remembering what it felt like when that happened.
That's beautiful. I
And so
like that.
so now it's in the past. So now, like, things happen, right? It happened in the past and things went out of whack, but now we're going to do it again. We're going to now bring our marriage back into the place where it was back then. How
Mm-hmm.
much easier is it now to set that goal to make it happen? We've already done it once. We can do it again, because our subconscious is going, yeah, we already did that before. Let's do it again. Because the subconscious doesn't know the difference between past, present, or future.
Right.
It just knows that it is. So if you make it believable, then, and you remember it as in the past, it's going to it can happen way easier. So now I'm setting the goal that we're going to bring our marriage into alignment with joy and peace and love and all the things, it is going to happen much, much easier than if we're focusing on how terrible our spouse is.
Yeah, you're so right. But I do want to also add here that when you are projecting yourself into the past, not the past, I'm sorry, the future, saying that this is what I want to help do, this is how I want it to look, and then you move it to the past, you're also going to have to insert some non-negotiables,
Hmm.
right? So for me, like, when I wanted to change the marriage I had with my husband, right? Number one, I wasn't taking complete ownership for the whole thing because it takes two to tango, right?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
But I couldn't blame the entirety on him either because it takes two to tango. I had to take some responsibility.
Of course.
But like some of my non-negotiables were like, okay, you don't get to scream at me. You don't
Hmm.
get
Right.
to call names. You don't get to be disrespectful in conversations. I'm not going to be disrespectful in conversations either.
Right.
That was a non-negotiable, right? And we can
Yeah.
do this with our money too. Like one of the non-negotiables I have is like, I make sure I do some sort of charitable donation every time that I have money coming in. As a church, as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I make sure I pay my tithing, right? Because that
Right.
tithing doesn't only just go to build temples and church houses, but it goes to a lot of humanitarian aid,
Right.
right? I'm all about that. Totally all
Yeah.
about that too. But I also make sure that I allot a certain percentage of that money for play,
Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
right?
for sure.
Because the thing is the more we learn to enjoy our money and not actually fear it, because the opposite of fear is fun. If we're feeling overwhelmed or scared of something, then we're not having enough fun with it. That's actually what's
Right.
happening, right? And if we
Yeah.
allot just a certain amount, doesn't have to be much,
Right.
but having some type of fun with that money is going to help you have a very different relationship with it.
Yeah.
Um, And so I think it's good to say like what are the non-negotiables because those non-negotiables are also where you fall back on and they stop you from falling further away
Hmm.
from your goal, right? So make
Yep.
sure you've got those non-negotiables in there as well. So you kind of hit upon this a little bit um before, but like how does this uh create like communication problems in our marriages and on our really, really important relationships? Like, how does this show up?
Oh, like scarcity, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so I'll give a little example. One of the things that can happen in a marriage, especially with the couples that you're dealing with, like where
Mm-hmm.
there's trauma,
Mm-hmm.
um, whether it's infidelity or pornography or whatever, what can happen? There's a lot of damage between the two people.
Right.
There's a lot of pain, suffering, resentment, um, all the rest, trauma, or whatever, all those emotions that can come. So every time we go to talk about something, those things, what happens? They all come rushing back, right? So let's say he cheated or was on pornography, so all of her emotions that of betrayal and the lack of trust and everything comes rushing back. And then what are the emotions that he's experiencing? Blame, shame, guilt, these all come rushing back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every
Mm-hmm.
time they go to try and have a meaningful conversation, meaning, you know, how often does a woman want to connect? A lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
and want to bring up things like, I want our marriage to be better, so we need to work on this, right? But then she says something that he needs to change, and all those emotions come back, and then he says something and gets angry or whatever because he's being defensive, and then those emotions come back to her, and it's just like this
Right.
isn't, yeah,
Well, it's like this. Like if you are driving and say that you've got on a pair of pink sunglasses and your spouse has got a pair
Mm,
of blue sunglasses, right?
right,
As you're looking out the window, you're going to say, "Oh, everything looks super pink." And
right,
but they're going to say, "No, everything looks super blue."
yeah,
Right?
right,
It's
exactly,
because it's the lens from which we view our world. And that's what
totally,
we're dealing with. See, our emotions color our lens.
yeah, totally. I agree with you 100%. And it could be anything, not just relationships. You
Yeah.
know, but putting on that taking responsibility or accountability lens rather
Mm-hmm.
than putting on the blaming lens. Like, hey, let's have a conversation. Okay, I'm going to take these lenses off and I'm going to put on the, take responsibility lens or accountability,
Mm-hmm.
ownership. I guess
Ownership.
ownership is better.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take off my victim lens and put on my ownership lens. Okay, now we're going to have a conversation, right? I'm going to
Right.
take ownership for everything rather than blaming or being a victim. This is a massive progress if we can learn to do that anytime we have a conversation, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I think it really comes down in relationships. I think a lot of it is just unconditional love. Like we want. I mean, what do people really want?
Oh
We
yeah.
really we just want unconditional love. That's all we really want.
And that's all love is, actually, is
Yeah.
unconditional love. If we're gonna get
Right.
technical, no
Yeah.
love is conditional.
Right.
Love
Yeah.
that
The
love there's no
true.
such thing, right?
Yeah. Right. The true definition of the term, is going to be
Mm-hmm.
unconditional love, meaning even if you act out in your pornography addiction, I still love you.
Mm-hmm.
That's unconditional love. It's not like, well, because you acted out, I'm not going to love you. I'm going to withhold love for the next
Right.
week because you acted out. That's not unconditional love.
No.
That's conditional love. I'm only going to love you when you're acting the way I want you to love me.
Right. And see that's the thing. This is why it's so dangerous to actually get into the scarcity mindset, because that is a scarcity mindset.
Oh yeah.
When we sit there and say, "Oh, I'm withdrawing my love from you," right?
Hmm.
Well, that's actually majorly triggering
Right.
to the pornography addiction. Because
Yeah.
it's like you said, I mean, when you withdraw, all of a sudden this fear of abandonment comes up big time.
Exactly.
And so what
Exactly.
do? They go
Go
to the
back to the
binky.
pornography.
They
They
go
go back
back
to
to
the
the
pornography.
binky, right? They
Exactly.
go back to the pornography. They go back to the
Yep.
thing. And this was something I had to learn myself too, was like every single time I withdrew, my husband dove deeper into it. He had to hide it from me. Like it became
Yeah.
very, very unhealthy. And so once I realized, like within me, that I actually had the power to love him, but I didn't have to love the addiction. I didn't have
Right.
to love that habit. I didn't have to love the actions, right?
Exactly.
And when I started growing myself as a person, I could at time come from a communication of abundance of love for him and for myself.
Oh, sure.
That was
Yeah.
major,
Hmm.
right? You can't
Yeah.
love someone without loving yourself first. It doesn't work. You can't give somebody else unconditional love without giving yourself unconditional love.
Right.
And you can't get unconditional love for yourself until you actually receive it from the Lord. It doesn't
Right.
work,
Yeah.
right? But once you get those things, and once you are actually willing to change, to shift, to grow, to
Hmm.
become a fantastic human, become the person that you're proud of, that you actually do love, when these problems come our way again, we get to set some loving boundaries. Boundaries are actually set on love.
Right.
They're set
For
on a
sure.
foundation of love. And this is
Yeah.
what makes them so incredibly fabulous. People think that boundaries are ultimatums. They're the punishments. This is what's
Yeah.
going to happen if you keep doing this, right?
Right.
And it's not about that. It's about how you're going to act
Right.
if this continues to happen, right?
Yeah.
Getting back into those non-negotiables, right? And
Right.
so if I'm looking at this and saying, if you're not going to tell me the truth, I'm going to have a hard time trusting you. That's a natural consequence.
Right.
And if you can't be honest, open, and vulnerable with me, and if you keep trying to shame me or trying to guilt trip me or trying to hide things or try to gaslight me, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to be able to trust you.
Right. Yep.
And I'm not going to feel bad that I don't trust you. That's just the consequence of your
Right.
action,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And when I could talk to him like that, it was a lot calmer and he was able to calm down himself and be like, "Oh, that actually makes sense." He didn't always like it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Right. Of
But
course.
eventually he would come back and be like, "You're right. You're absolutely right." And what that did is it gave him the space to start becoming emotionally healthy himself,
Right.
right?
Yeah. For
And
sure.
so what we're talking about, and this is the coolest thing ever here. As we're kind of like wrapping up this podcast, is that if we really want to get out of scarcity and stop focusing on the lack of money, the lack of love, the lack of relationships, the lack of, what we need to really focus on is where the love is. Even if, even if the only place you can feel love is between you and your Heavenly Father, that's great. That's a
Mm.
starting point.
For sure.
This is where we get to spend a lot more time with just Him.
Yeah.
If you speak to Him, right? Like speaking to that client that maybe is struggling with the disabilities, depression, like all of these fears, right? All this feeling of abandonment, this feeling like nobody loves me, nobody cares, I'm the black sheep,
Hmm.
and I'm all alone.
Yeah.
This is where you get to go away, maybe go for a drive. I love cemeteries. Like I am not even joking. Like I will drive up to my city cemetery and I'll just hang out there because it's so quiet. There's not kids in the background
Right.
distracting me, right? There's not the turmoil, and I can actually be quiet and I can have a fantastic conversation with God. Sometimes I'll take a paper and pen and I'll write a letter to him, and then he'll write back to me. I record the responses and the feelings and the emotions and the thoughts
Mm.
that come to me after I'm done writing a letter to him.
Yeah.
Focus where the love is, and all of a sudden scarcity starts to go away.
I love what you shared. No, I love that. I love it because those are some great ideas to connect with God and to get that feeling of unconditional love from Him, right?
Hmm.
He is the ultimate source of unconditional love. I want
Yeah.
to throw this out there because I had a thought while you were talking was and I'm sure this is for both sexes, but I think it's more so for men because men, I feel like they're not maybe not quite as connected with God as women are in some instances. At least I've seen that in my life, and
I've seen that too. I would agree.
especially men who are struggling with addictions to pornography or anything
Yeah.
when they're stuck in the nice guy syndrome where they're just constantly fighting for some form of love or validation because they don't typically love themselves.
Hmm.
um this is a major reason why I created Rise Undaunted. So we have our basic program is called the Band of Brothers, and basically we just get together once a week, and it could be in a local group if there's enough guys in your area. We create a local group. If not, it's online. But here's the whole purpose of that. The main purpose is for men to be able to go into that place and have a safe space where they can actually share something that they're struggling with or something that they did. And the reason why that's important is because it is a place where they're going to receive unconditional love and acceptance from everyone there.
Hmm.
No one is
Yeah.
going to shame them. No one is going to criticize them. They're just going to love and accept them for who they are, no matter what they did. And to be honest, that is not something that always exists at the home.
No. It doesn't.
especially with a wife who's traumatized, who's, like constantly nagging about his addiction or whatever it is. That is not something that he gets at home. Unfortunately, that is
Hmm.
not a lot of the time what he can get at home. He has to have that place because for my story, I cursed God.
I did
I,
too.
he's not gonna show, I'm not gonna feel any love from him if I'm cursing him. Let's be honest.
Not in the
He might be
moment. Yeah.
he might be sending me the love, but I'm sure as heck not gonna feel it if I'm cursing him because he's never helped me conquer this 30-year addiction, right? I'm gonna be
Hmm.
angry and upset at him because I did all the things I was supposed to and it never helped, for example, right? And so having a place where maybe I'm not feeling love from God and I'm not feeling love from my spouse and I'm not feeling love from anybody else, well, you can come to Rise Undaunted and feel that love. It's
Yeah.
it's not pushy. It's just simply pure love and acceptance because honestly, most of the guys you're talking to have probably been through the exact same
Hmm.
thing that
Hmm.
you're going through. And so
Yeah.
they understand what it is and they know how important it is to just have that unconditional love and acceptance so that
Yeah.
once you feel that love, then you can start to heal the wounds that are inside. And we all have them. We all have those wounds, right? And
Absolutely. And this is why I say, to the women that are feeling like they have to nag or that they feel like they have to get angry or feeling like they have to withdraw from their spouses, right? Nobody's judging you for that because it is a
right,
very, very difficult
of
situation
course.
to be in, right? But you can understand each other better than what you think you can.
Hmm.
Because even though, maybe he's looking at pornography and maybe you're feeling like you have to close in on yourself, like everything's imploding on you, right? The thing is you both feel that way. You're acting out on it in very different ways, yes, but you're both feeling the fear of abandonment.
Right.
You're both feeling the turmoil, the chaos. You're both wanting to connect with each other, but you're both afraid to do it.
Yeah.
You're both afraid that if you come to the other person with what's really going on, that you're going to be rejected,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Yep.
You're both afraid of those things.
Yep.
So once we start actually addressing these things in ourself, we give space at that time. Like once we become emotionally healthy ourselves, emotionally mature, we give space for the other person to start doing the same thing. So whoever starts it,
Right. Yeah.
that's fantastic.
Totally.
You give space. And the other cool thing is, I don't normally, I've actually recently started talking more about money in my coaching and stuff because I feel like it is very much tied to love. It
For
really,
sure.
really is, right? Because here's the thing. Before, I didn't really talk about money much like you were saying earlier, in my programs. But I
Mhm.
noticed something very interesting. Every single person that I was coaching came out of my program with more than what they paid for it.
Oh, heck yeah.
Every single time,
Yeah.
even though we weren't talking about money, right? They
Right.
were telling me about these successes. I actually had one gal, her husband ended up getting a better job. She got a pay raise, and that created like an extra $2,000 for them a month right there.
Right.
And then um they had like a car payment too that they were still paying on. And one day it was completely paid off, like just out of the blue.
Yeah.
And they called the bank. They're like, "What happened? We still owed like, you know, five
Right.
thousand dollars on this car." And they told her that somebody walked into the bank and donated like thousands of dollars to pay off people's debts
Wow.
just because they
That's
wanted to.
cool.
They wanted to help. It was like $30,000 or something like that.
Nice.
And they paid off her car with
That's cool.
that donation, right? Just
Yeah.
because she started focusing more on love and the good people out there, it brought somebody to her
Yeah.
to help. And so by the time I was done coaching her, she had like $3,000 extra a month.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's what happens. And this is why I'm saying, like we're really seriously saying that when we start focusing on the love,
Yeah.
we communicate better.
Right.
We communicate in very, very clear ways. Another really cool story that I got to share too. Last summer, I had someone that was very, very dear to me, like majorly misjudge me.
Oh.
Majorly misjudge me. I was so upset and I was
Mm.
so mad. Like, how? How could they, like, what the heck? Like, why would you do that? Right?
Right.
And I was really upset for like about a week or so. And as I was communicating with God and talking to him, he talked to me about this very same thing, like, is there enough love? And that's the
Right.
question he asked me, right? Like, are you seeing a scarcity of love? Or are you seeing an abundance of love? And I was like, oh, right? And he's like, if one of your kids misjudged you, would it bother you? And I'm like, probably not, not like this. Like, I would sit down and talk to the kids and be like, let's actually discuss this, right?
Yeah.
But the reason why it wouldn't bother me is because I have sufficient love for them.
Right.
My love for this person was lacking.
Mm.
Once I increased it, I was able to communicate in a very, very effective way to this person to help them see my point of view. And not only that, this person also agreed with my point of view. And they were like, I am so sorry. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Right? We learn to communicate better. We learn to accept the person, not what they're doing, just the person.
Yeah.
We learn like what actions we need to take because love gives us clarity and love takes us out of the scarcity mindset and we
Yeah.
bring in all kinds of abundance to us.
Right. Yeah, we're gonna give them the benefit of the doubt when we love
Yeah.
them,
Yes.
right? And so it reduces the conflict, and that just causes even more love, right? It's like, anyways, yeah, for sure. I see all the time. Like I've had several guys who join, they're literally only paying $25 a month. But the fact that they're showing up and they're loving, I've seen guys within 2 or 3 months of having huge, like 50% increases in income.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like massive or higher than that. And it's so awesome to see because it really is tied. It's like scarcity, of love is tied to scarcity of money, like you were
Yes.
saying.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
There really is enough. And love is one
Oh,
of those commodities. It's not in short supply.
oh yeah,
And so if we want to focus on changing things, that's what we need to focus on. Love it.
definitely.
Love it. Trevor, thanks so much for being here today, talking about this topic. I think this was fantastic.
Oh yeah, thanks for
Really,
having me.
really good. Yes, of course. And of course, I'm going to have you back, right?
Right? Love it.
Okay. All right, you guys, we'll have Trevor back. Let us know also, like, what are some topics you'd love Trevor and I to cover in this podcast? If there's any questions you guys have for us, let us know. And in the meantime, we'll see you guys on the other side. Bye, guys. Hey guys, thanks so much for hanging out with me today and listening in on this podcasting episode. Don't forget to tune in next week. It's gonna be